Okay, so let's unpack this. I want you to just picture this for a second. You walk into a movie theater, it's a Friday night, and you've seen the poster for the movie you're about to see. It's got Timothée Chalamet on it.
Hmm.
He's looking super stylish, vintage glasses, perfect hair, and he's holding a ping pong paddle.
Okay, so right away, I feel like I know exactly what kind of movie that is.
Right. You immediately think, okay, cool, I get it. This is a sports biopic. It's going to be the Rocky of table tennis.
Totally. You're expecting the training montage, the humble beginnings.
Exactly. The big loss in the second act that humbles him. And then, the glorious slow motion winning point at the end where the crowd just goes wild.
It's the classic underdog formula. It's like cinema comfort food.
Yeah.
You go in knowing exactly what you're going to get.
Exactly. You buy your popcorn, you sit down, and you get ready for those feel-good vibes. But then the movie starts.
Mhm.
And instead of like the Mighty Ducks with ping pong balls, you basically get a 2-hour panic attack.
Wow. That is quite the bait and switch. It really is. And that is the perfect setup for the movie we are deep diving into today, Marty Supreme. We're looking at this through the lens of a review by Jeremy Johns. And the big takeaway right off the bat is that this movie is a total deception. It's a cinematic prank.
Well, it really speaks to how we categorize movies, right? You see a sport, you just automatically expect a sports movie. But our source material here is suggesting Marty Supreme it defies all of those expectations.
Yeah, the mission of this deep dive is to really dissect that deception.
Yeah.
We're talking about a film that looks like a tournament movie,
Yeah.
but is actually about schemes, hustles, and just absolute chaos.
And just to set the stage, the reviewer, Jeremy Johns, he points out that while Chalamet plays Marty Mauser, who's, an amazing ping pong player, the movie is not about the sport.
The ping pong is almost secondary.
It's totally secondary. It's all about the desperation of the hustle. The table tennis is just the vehicle for a much, much more stressful ride. Yeah, let's get into that vibe check. The reviewer admits he had no idea what he was walking into. He just heard it had amazing energy and momentum. But the reality, he says, this isn't really a ping pong movie. Not really.
And that's such a crucial distinction, If you go in looking for the mechanics of the game or you're a table tennis fan,
Yeah.
you're going to miss the whole point.
The whole plot is just Marty needing to get from New York to a championship in Tokyo. But the journey isn't practice montages. It's just schemes. It's hustles.
It's financial survival.
Yes. Johns describes the plot as this relentless loop, and it sounds exhausting just hearing about it. Marty runs a scheme to get money, it falls through, tries another one, that falls through. It's not about training, it's about grifting.
It reminds me of the concept of a MacGuffin in film.
Okay, hang on. Unpack that for us. What's a MacGuffin in this context?
Sure. So a MacGuffin is basically a plot device, an object, a goal, whatever, that the characters in the story care about intensely. But for us, the audience, it's really just an excuse to get the plot moving.
Right, like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction.
Exactly. We never find out what's in it, and it doesn't matter. What matters is what people will do to get it. So here, in Marty Supreme, the ping pong tournament in Tokyo, that's the MacGuffin.
It's the engine, not the destination.
Precisely. The real story is the desperation, the moral compromises, and the absolute chaos he brings into his life just to get a plane ticket.
That makes so much sense, and it explains why the movie feels the way it does. And speaking of feelings, this is where it gets really interesting, or maybe really stressful. The reviewer said while he was watching, he had this sudden realization. He said, this has Uncut Gems energy going on here.
Oh, wow. Uncut Gems. That is a heavy comparison.
It is, right? For anyone who hasn't seen it, that movie is famous for basically being an anxiety attack on film. It's just relentless.
It's loud, it's sweaty. Yeah.
And it turns out there's a reason. The reviewer didn't know this going in, but he had this aha moment. Marty Supreme is directed by Josh Safdie.
One half of the Safdie brothers who did Uncut Gems.
Exactly. The Josh side of the Safdie brothers. And Johns points out that sometimes a director's cinematic fingerprint is so strong you can identify them just by the stress level.
And that's a really good point. A director's fingerprint isn't just visual style. It's not just, how they light a scene. It's pacing. It's the emotional toll it takes on you. The Safdie fingerprint is defined by a lack of oxygen.
A lack of oxygen.
Metaphorically, yeah.
Yeah.
They create films with, as Johns puts it, very little time to breathe. It's this exhausting energy. They just stack dialogue on top of dialogue, problem on top of problem, until the audience feels as cornered as the main character.
Yeah, John says it's that kind of energy that charges you up while it's also draining you. You feel the pressure. You feel the fact that this money has to be made in like a tiny amount of time. It's nonstop.
And that actually serves the theme. If the movie gave you a second to breathe, you might start to rationally question Marty's choices.
Yeah.
You'd be like, hey, man, maybe just get a regular job.
Yeah.
But by keeping it so frantic, we're trapped in that same desperate headspace. We stop thinking and we just start feeling the panic.
It's basically anxiety cinema.
It's becoming a real subgenre. You see it in films like Shiva Baby or even a show like The Bear. Entertainment designed to spike your cortisol.
I love that. I'm going to relax this weekend by spiking my cortisol. But okay, speaking of the guy causing all this stress, let's talk about the character, because this is Timothée Chalamet as we've never seen him.
Right. He's usually the brooding heartthrob or, the space messiah in Dune.
Not here. The reviewer dropped an analogy that I absolutely loved. He called this character the Saul Goodman of ping-pong.
Oh, that's a powerful comparison that immediately paints a very clear picture.
Doesn't it? Jan says when he watched Better Call Saul, he had to remind himself he's not a lawyer who hustles. He's a hustler who just happened to go into law.
And the parallel here is Marty is a con man, a hustler, who just happened to go into ping pong. The paddle is his law degree. It's a tool for the grift.
Exactly. Grifter first, paddle wielder second, and apparently Chalamet is just fantastic in the role. John says he deserves all the praise. He just disappears into this sleazy, desperate energy. But, and this is a big but, don't expect to like him.
Right, which brings us to the whole likability factor, which can be a real challenge for some viewers.
Oh man, the reviewer was blunt about this. He called the movie a vortex of negativity.
A vortex of negativity, that's harsh.
He says, is his character likable? No. In fact, he says almost no one in the whole movie is likable.
That's a bold choice. I mean, usually you want the audience to root for somebody. You need a moral anchor.
Well, according to Johns, the most likable character in the entire film is the dog.
The dog.
Just the dog. Everyone else, he literally lists them off. Dicks, douchebags, bitches, assholes.
Wow, quite the roster.
It is. And he says that's pretty much everyone with any significant screen time.
So that raises a really important question.
Yeah.
Why do we watch movies full of unlikable people? It's a risk. If you don't like anyone, why do you care if they succeed or fail?
Well, Johns touches on this. He calls it a cautionary tale. He suggests the movie isn't trying to make you feel good. It's trying to show you a specific worldview.
Okay, tell me more about that.
He frames it as birds of a feather flock together kind of thing. The movie basically demonstrates that shitty behavior begets shitty behavior. When you act a certain way, when you're always looking for an angle, you attract a certain type of person.
That makes a lot of sense. It's systemic. If you're a grifter, you're going to be surrounded by other grifters.
Exactly. You create a world where everyone is trying to screw everyone else over. There's no trust, that exhausting energy we talked about.
Yeah.
It comes from that. You can never, ever relax.
So in that world, being likable is probably a weakness. Being a douchebag, to use the reviewer's term, is actually a survival mechanism.
Speaking of survival mechanisms,
Yeah.
okay, I have to pivot to the cast because this part of the review is it was baffling. The casting sounds absolutely bizarre.
Eclectic, it seems.
First off, you've got Odessa A'zion, who was great in the Hellraiser reboot, so solid young talent. But then he says there are just comedians sprinkled throughout the movie.
That can create a really surreal feeling when you see comedy faces in a stressful drama.
Like Penn Jillette.
From Penn and Teller.
Yeah.
The magician.
Yes. He just shows up. John's had this moment of like, wait, is that Penn in? It just throws you completely off balance.
Which kind of fits the whole theme of magic and deception, ironically.
True. But the biggest shock, the one I still can't really get my head around, is Kevin O'Leary.
Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. No way.
Yes. The guy who says you're dead to me on national television. And get this, it's not just a cameo. He's acting. He has a role.
Okay, so does he play a character or is he playing himself? Or
That's the hilarious part. John says he's basically just playing Kevin O'Leary, a version of himself.
That's so strange for a narrative film like this.
And Johns points out this one specific detail I love. He says Kevin is wearing a watch with a red strap. Apparently that's a Kevin O'Leary thing. It's his signature look.
It just blurs that line between reality and fiction. It's almost breaking the fourth wall without actually doing it.
It totally confused the reviewer. He was asking himself, wait, is this a biopic? Did the real person this is based on actually know Kevin O'Leary?
It creates this sense of disorientation. And that brings us to the whole fact versus fiction thing. Because this is based on a real person, right?
Right, loosely. So Marty Mauser, the Chalamet character, is based on a real table tennis legend named Marty Reisman. The reviewer wasn't sure.
But it's a very loose adaptation.
Very loose. Johns compares it to Nucky Thompson in Boardwalk Empire. Nucky was based on the real Enoch Johnson, but the show took massive liberties to create a better story.
So they took the essence of the real guy, the hustle, the legend, and just built this Saul Goodman narrative around it.
Which means Kevin O'Leary with his red watch probably wasn't historically accurate to the real Marty Reisman's life.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. But it fits the vibe of the movie's universe. It signals to the audience that this is a high-stakes financial game, even if it's played with ping-pong paddles.
So we've got the stress, the unlikable hustlers, Mr. Wonderful acting, but is the movie actually good? What's the verdict?
This is where Johns gets a bit more critical. He clearly enjoyed parts of it, but he says it's not a perfect film.
Yeah, he mentioned the runtime. He thought it was a bit too long, could have shaved some time off.
And with a high-stress movie, pacing is everything. If you keep the audience at a level 10 anxiety for too long, they just go numb. You burn them out.
Right, but there was another critique, too, about the ending.
Yes, the tournament payoff.
Yeah.
If you're waiting for that big Karate Kid moment at the end, John says it's not as fulfilling as I wanted it to be.
Which makes sense if the movie was never really about the sport to begin with.
Exactly. The tournament is just another setting for a scheme, not the emotional climax of a hero's journey. It denies you that dopamine hit of the big win.
He also said the character arc, the growth, is almost non-existent until the very, very end.
Right. He says it all happens in the last minute and a half of the movie.
Can you imagine 2 hours of watching this guy spiral and then boom, a tiny crumb of growth right at the buzzer?
So Johns admits this movie is polarizing. It's not for everyone, which is why he gives us this test, a 3-question test, to see if you should watch it.
Okay, listener, play along. You need to say yes to at least 2 of these. Question 1. Do you need your protagonist to be a role model?
Based on everything we've said, if you answer yes to that one, you should probably stay home.
Exactly. Okay, question 2. Do you like solid acting?
Well, that seems to be the big redeeming factor. Chalamet and the cast are great, even if the characters aren't.
So that's an easy yes. Now for the tiebreaker. Question 3. Do you like to watch a douchebag claw their way through trial by fire?
That is a very specific genre description.
It is. But think about it. That's the Wolf of Wall Street. It's Succession. It's Uncut Gems. It's a whole genre of competent people being terrible.
That's a great way to put it.
So if you say no to role models, but yes to solid acting and yes to watching a douchebag struggle, you're the target audience.
A very specific niche, but a growing one.
It really is. And John says despite all this, he dug it. He had a good time. He even says it's worth buying on Blu-ray if you can handle the stress.
That's a pretty strong endorsement for such a polarizing film.
He summarizes it as absolute madness, a recipe of a con man in the ping-pong world. And his final takeaway is something I think a lot of us can relate to. He just says, douchebags just make for really entertaining TV.
There's a truth to that. Conflict drives story. If everyone's nice and follows the rules, you don't have a hustle. You have a documentary about a well-run community center.
And no one's buying a ticket for that.
Exactly.
So it seems like Marty Supreme is a wild ride that uses a niche sport to tell this universal story about greed and desperation.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
It's a deconstruction of the sports movie. Instead of the glory of the win, you just get the relief of survival.
And you get a dog that's better than all the humans combined.
Always a plus.
Always. Look, if
Yeah.
you want a feel-good family film, maybe stick to the actual Mighty Ducks. But if you want to see Chalamet sweat and scheme while Kevin O'Leary checks his red-strapped watch, this is for you.
You know, before we wrap up, there's one thought I want to leave the listener with. We've talked a lot about this exhausting energy, this uncut gems effect. It's a trend we're seeing more and more.
Yeah, shows like The Bear do it, too. We seem to be drawn to these high-stress situations.
Exactly. And it raises this provocative question. Why are we so drawn to media that actively stresses us out? I mean, we live in stressful times, yet we find leisure in anxiety-inducing entertainment.
Is it just masochism?
Or is it cathartic? Is it a way to practice feeling stress in a safe environment? When you watch Marty Mauser panic, you feel the adrenaline, but you know that you aren't the one in trouble. It lets us process anxiety without the real-world consequences.
Or maybe we just like seeing someone who's having a much worse day than we are. Well, on that note of Schadenfreude, that's all we have for this deep dive into Marty Supreme. Thanks for listening. Maybe go play some ping pong this week.
Just keep the betting to a minimum.
Wise advice. See you next